Alright, now it's time for us to understand a very important concept in CSS called as CSS Selectors. Now, what do you mean by CSS Selectors? You must understand, my friend, you have knowingly, unknowingly been using CSS Selectors up until this point of time. What do you mean if you ask me? Watch it. If I take you to my browser window, this is clearly a completely unstyled HTML document, right? What were we doing? See, if I bring my editor, this is my edit. What were we doing? We were going and selecting a particular element, right? For example, I want to style H1. I select H1 and I apply styling to it. H1 gets styled. As you can see, it got styled. Similar, what were we doing? We selected the next element. For example, this P. All P tags, I want to select them and style it in a particular way. Maybe like this. As you can see, all of them have got styled. Maybe I want to select all the H2 tags and style them. So we selected that H2 tag and we styled them like this. So clearly styling is possible. What I'm trying to say is this ability for CSS to go into an HTML document, select the HTML elements and apply styling to it can be done very simple and in extremely detailed and complicated ways as well. My friend, is the concept of CSS selectors. Now that you guys understood about selectors in CSS, let me tell you, when we speak about CSS selectors, there are basically two types of CSS selectors. One type is called as your basic selectors and the other is called as your advanced selectors. Under basic selectors, you have something called as your universal selector, you have something called as the element selector, you have something called as the class selector, ID selector, and you also have something called as group selector. When it comes to advanced, it gets even more crazier because you have n number of options. You have options such as your child selectors, you have options such as your sibling selectors, you have options such as attribute selectors, you have something called as pseudo classes, you have something called as pseudo elements. All of this is what we must be understanding one by one, and that is what is going to make you a very, very efficient front-end developer. Irrespective, what I want you to understand is there is a general syntax which you must keep in mind when using CSS selectors. And what is a general syntax? It starts with a selector, right? And the selector can be any one of these selectors, followed by a declaration, which is nothing but these curly brackets, these parentheses. Inside that, you can have multiple CSS property value pairs. Of course, each of them separated by a semicolon, right? And properties, there are n number of properties in CSS. Values, there are n number of values in CSS. Now what we are going to do is spend sufficient time understanding each of these selectors in great detail and then move on to understanding the different properties and values which exist in CSS, which can transform a black and white website into something extremely visually stunning. If you're as excited as me, stay tuned for more. Alright, my friend, now let's start deep diving into the world of selectors. Let's begin with the basic selectors available in, and these are the different basic selectors. Out of the different basic selectors, I'm going to start by discussing the universal selector. Now, what is this universal selector and how are we going to use it? Let me show you. But before that, if I take you to my browser window, see, this is a basic unstyled HTML file that I have. There is clearly no styling here. I want to apply some styling through it, and through that I want to show you how this universal selector would work, right? So let me take you to my code. As you guys can see, this is that HTML. We have been using this many a times now. Now, first and foremost, if really selectors in CSS has to become crystal clear to you, you must make a habit of converting your HTML document into what we call as an HTML tree. Now, what do you mean by an HTML tree, if you ask me? It's nothing but the sequence in which the tags of your HTML document are placed. Now, what do you mean, you might ask? See, there are few tags which is inside other tags. There are tags which is inside other tags. So, if I show it as a tree, how would it look like? Now, be with me and understand. Clearly, the first tag inside which all other tags are present is the HTML tag, right? That is the first tag I'm showing. If you come below and start tracing, Below HTML, there is another tag, or inside HTML, there is another tag. Technically, this is called as a child element. It is present inside another tag, right? So see, inside HTML, there is head. Now if we inside head, so see, I'm going inside head. Inside head, we have title, we have link, and I'm showing those two tags. Come inside HTML itself, there is another tag called as body. So see, inside HTML itself, there is another tag called as body, and inside the body tag, H1, P, H2, P, image, H3, all these different tags, which I'm just listing out like this. Any confusion till here? Now what I want to do is all these tags inside the body, which is all these tags. Because anyways, whatever styling you apply will only apply to the elements in the body, because whatever is there, the head is clearly not of any styling component is not there. And that's which means our focus should be whatever is inside the body, right? So I want to style all these components. Now listen, I'm saying I want to style all these components in a similar manner. Now what is that if you ask me? Maybe I want to style everything in a way wherein the background color is powder blue, a shade of blue called as powder blue, and the font is maybe cursive in nature. I want to do these two things. But where am I going to write the CSS for that if you ask me? I'm not going to write it inside every element. Inline is out of the question. I'm not going to use internal CSS. I'm going to use external CSS. So I will just remove that tree for now. This is that external CSS document called as index.css, and first only I've linked it. See, I've linked it and kept it ready. Whatever I'm going to write in selectors, obviously it makes sense to write it inside the CSS file. Because what is CSS duty? To select HTML elements and style it. HTML we have discussed enough. Now it is time for us to discuss about CSS, right? So understand this carefully. If I go back to my browser window, this is my web page. I'm just bringing my index.css file here. I'm just bringing it here, right? Great. Now, whatever I'm going to write is inside this index.css file. Now, what you must understand is this is the general syntax of a selector, if you remember. Selector followed by declaration followed by the property and value pairs inside that. So here, which is the selector I'm using? The selector I'm going to use is the universal selector. Now, universal selector means the word should not come to your mind. This word should disappear and this character, which is an asterisk or a star, should come into your mind. And how to use it? Let me show you. The selector, universal selector means star. I will tell star. Declaration means I will put open bracket, close bracket, right? Like this. Now, inside this property value pairs I should be mentioning. So maybe I want background color. So tell background color. And what is the background color? Powder blue, like this, right? Powder blue. And I'll put a semicolon, right? Just this much if I do, and if I refresh my HTML page, will it happen? Yes. And if I scroll down, you can see all the elements, background color has become powder blue. Universal. Universal means what? All, everything. When you say universe, you mean everything, the entire existence. Something similar. Now, I want all the font to become cursive in nature. So watch it, I'll just press enter. My next property value pair is font family. And I will tell cursive like this. If I do this, and if in case I refresh it, you can see all the elements become cursive in nature. If I scroll down, you can notice, of course, images are not going to change, but wherever there is text, it has become cursive in nature. So universal selector means it will select all the elements present inside the body of your HTML page. I hope till this point of time it is clear. Obviously, head portion is unaffected because styling is never applied in the head portion. Styling is always applied on what is visible to the user, which is the body portion of your browser. Any confusion till here? So see, universal selector. Now that universal selector is clear to you, let's move forward and understand the next type of selector, which is called as your element selector. Now, how does this element selector work? Now, you must understand, element means what? Element means any element, any HTML. Inside if you come, it can be H1, P, H2, H3, image, any element. you should be able to pick an element and style it. Now we're able to. So I'll just remove this universal selector and I will just refresh my page. If in case I remove this and refresh my page, obviously there is not going to be any styling in it whatsoever. Any confusion till this point of time? Now the thing is, I want to select that first heading, full stack web development. Now that is an H1 tag. Now that is the element I want to select. So how will you select? Watch it. I will tell selector. Again, general syntax, bring the cursor down. General syntax remains the same. H1. Now selector is done. Declaration. So I'll put parentheses. After which, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my property value pairs. So the property value is first property, maybe I will tell background color. Background color is going to be red. Right. Next, I want the color of the font. So I will tell color. And that has to be maybe yellow. Next, font family. Maybe I want the font family to be cursive. Any confusion till this point of time? Now, what is this going to do? This CSS, it is going to select all the elements inside my HTML file which matches this element called as H1. And there is only one H1, which is full stack web development. That gets selected and gets styled in this manner like this. As you can see, it perfect works. Any confusion till this point of time? Similarly, if I change this H1 to P, watch it. If I just go change that H1 to P, now all P tags will get selected like this. As you can see, if I scroll down, you can clearly notice all P tags have got selected. So these are called as element selectors. I hope universal selector is clear to you. Element selectors is clear to you, right? Now, something interesting I want to show. You've really been focusing. You would understand what I'm trying to say. See, now, let us assume I change this to powder blue. And then I change this, this color. I will just remove that color part completely. Font family is cursive. Now, if I go put star there instead of P. Now tell me, star element selector or universal selector? Universal. Which means this is applied to every HTML element in the body. Refresh. Everything inside the body. Would you agree with me? Now, you just learned about element selector. Now, don't you think body is also an HTML element, right? Which means I can replace that star with body. I'll tell body. If I tell body, what am I telling? Every HTML element in the body should have background color powder blue, should have font cursor, correct? If in case shit, you can notice absolutely no change. Which means my universal selector gave me, what body element selector gave me. Which means, is there no difference between universal and element selector? This is a natural question which is going to be asked to you even in your CSS interviews. Is there a difference? 100% there is. What is the difference? Let me show you. Now it's time for us to understand the difference between your universal selector and your element selector. Is there a difference or are both going to work the same way? Now you must understand this. To clearly define the difference, you should be writing some code. Let's see what is the code I'm going to write. If I take you to my browser window, this is the final output of the HTML code which I'm going to write. So there is hello, there is namaste, and there is hola, which I have written. H1, H2, H3 tags, right? Simple code. If I take you to the HTML code for the same, you can notice this is the HTML code wherein you have your HTML, you have your head, inside which a title, inside which a link to an external CSS file called as index.css, and of course inside the body H1, H2 and H3. Any confusion till this point of time? Now clearly there is no styling. I am going to apply styling, and whatever styling I will be writing is going to be present inside the external CSS file. Now that it is clear, let us go back to my browser window along with the CSS so that we can be writing some CSS associated with it. So here, this is my index.css. This is our browser window. Now, I want to change the background color of all the elements present inside the body to cyan. Cyan is another shade of blue, right? So I'll not use the universal selector. I'll first use the element selector, and the element I'm selecting is the body HTML element. So watch it. I will tell body, that is my selector because body is an element. Declaration, inside that I will tell background color is my property, value is cyan or cyan, like this. Will this work? Let's see. If I just go refresh it, clearly you can notice everything has become cyan. Now I want you to think. After all, what am I saying? All the elements inside the body, should be colored as cyan. Background color should be cyan. Now, which means any element I put inside body should have this property associated with it. But let us see whether that would really be the case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you back to my HTML code, and in my HTML code, I'm going to add another element into the body, which is a simple text box with a label called as name where I can enter my name. So what I will do is I'll go below H3, press enter. First I'll put label, and the label is name. Next, below that, anyways, this is an inline element, so line break will not happen. In the next line, I'm going to tell my input tag. And if I press enter, it will tell type is text box, or type is text, I will tell, enough. Name, you can give anything. Here it doesn't matter because we are not going to send it to any server, so I will just leave it empty. But the point is, if I take you back to my browser window, right, along with my CSS code, you must understand something. If in case I refresh this, notice the box came, the label came, but look at the background color of the box, my dear friend, and tell me, is it white or is it cyan? Clearly it is cyan, or clearly it is white, which means this CSS property was not applied to this HTML element, which is inside body. It was not applied. That is the nature of the element selector. If the element is body, yes, according to you, it means everything inside the body. But few HTML elements that you place inside the body has its own CSS property, has its own styling. The styling of an input box by default is such that the background color is always white. But I want that to be overridden, and I want that also to be cyan. But unfortunately, that did not happen because a body or an element selector values the privacy, values the integrity of certain HTML elements and doesn't override it. But the universal selector is of a different nature. The universal selector does not care about all these things. If I go to my CSS file and replace this body with my universal selector, which is star, universal selector is not going to do any of that. Make it star. What it will be doing is, it will be like, say, I don't care whether you are an input text box or what. Background color has to be cyan. And if in case I refresh, clearly you can see. Any confusion till this point of time? So I think you have clearly been able to identify the difference, right? And what is the difference? If you use body element selector to apply a single or to apply a CSS property to all the elements inside the body of your HTML page, few of the HTML elements will not accept that styling, and it will stick on to their default styling. But if you use a universal selector, it will be overriding all of that. So I think it is clear to you when to use universal selector. When you want this property to be compulsorily applied on every HTML element present in your body, go for star. If you do not want that and you want certain default CSS styling of certain elements to be retained and preserved, then make use of body. It's as simple as that. I hope the difference is crystal clear to you. Wisely select between the both. Let's move on to the next CSS selector, which is my group selector. Now, when would someone ideally be using the group selector is something we should be exploring. So understand the syntax first and foremost. If in case I take you to my browser window, please understand this is the code which I have and this is the output which I got for that code. Now, what I want you to understand is a very simple thing, right? Here now H1 is there, H2 is there, H3 is there, right? Now I want to apply styling for all three components. So what one way I can do is, now I'm not going to use external CSS because I want you to see both the HTML and the CSS in the same page. So the best way is to place CSS inside the HTML code, and that is called as internal CSS. So I'll go inside the head. After title, I'll put my style tag. right? Inside style, I will go inside that. Now, first, I will use your regular element selector. So the element I want to select is H1. So I will tell H1. I'll put the declaration and inside that the property value pairs. So the property I will tell background color is maybe yellow, right? After which next what I'm going to tell is the font maybe family, which I will make it as cursive. Wonderful, right? So now H1 will get selected and it will be styled. If I refresh it, clearly you can see that has got applied, no doubt about it. Now the same styling I want it to be applied even for H2. So what will you do? What I will do is I have to select H2 again. So I will go inside style tag and there I will tell H2. After telling H2, I'm going to put the braces and there same styling I want. So I will just copy this and I will paste it inside this. If I do this and if I go and if I just refresh the page, definitely it has applied. Same thing I want to apply for H3 also. You have to select it. So if I go there and I will tell H3 like this and inside that I'll paste the same thing. If I go and refresh it, definitely it has got applied. Now, this is a different selector, this is a different selector, this is a different selector. This is targeting a different element, this is targeting a different element, this is targeting a different element. But don't you think the properties inside and their values are one and the same? So this has been repeated multiple times. Is there an efficient way in which I could group these three elements together and apply this property value pair? Can you do that? Yes. And that is the magic which the group selector provides for you. How to do it? Very simple. I'll remove all this H1, H2, H3 completely. I'll remove. All I will do is I will tell H1, comma, H2, comma, H3. These are the three elements you want to select. I'll put a declaration. Inside that, I will paste it. Just to show you there will be a difference, I'll change the color from yellow to maybe cyan like this. Now, what you're seeing is a group selector. See, this is the group. And how many elements are there in the group? 3 elements, H1, H2, H3. These are the 3 elements. The group of these 3 elements, on them I'm applying the same property value pairs. And will it work? Watch it. If I go there and I refresh it, there you go. So it's a very handy selector. Whenever the same styling has to be applied to multiple elements and you want to select them based on the element, the group selector is a very, very handy tool. So I hope it is clear to you. Now let's move on to the next type of selector called as the class selector. Now it's time for us to understand about the class selector in CSS. Let me tell you, my dear friend, class selectors are probably one of the most widely used selectors amongst all the selectors in CSS. And why is this selector so widely used? You will understand it in a short while. But let us assume this is the HTML document which I have in front of me. And when I render it in my browser, this is what it looks like. And we have seen this many a times before. If I increase the size a little bit, you can see that there are different contents in this HTML page, but I can actually classify the contents into 2 groups. If I ignore the images, I can classify the content into 2 groups. The first classification would be those of headings, all headings. And the other classification could be that of information present below the headings. Now, what do I mean by both of this here? Full stack web development is a heading. Technologies related to full stack web development is another heading. Front-end technologies is another heading. If I scroll down, similarly, back-end technologies is another heading. If I scroll down, database technologies is another heading. Whereas below database, see this information. This is information. Similarly, there is information below back-end technologies. There is information below front-end. Similarly, if I scroll on top, there's information below full stack web development also. Now, what I want to do is, I want to style all my headings in a particular way. I want to style all the information present in my web page in a different way. Now, how are we going to do that? For that, first of all, we will have to classify our elements into 2 categories. The first category is that of headings. The second category is that of information, or technically class heading, class info. Can we make HTML elements belong to a particular class? 100% we can. How, if you ask me? Let me show you. If I take you to my editor, my dear friend, this is the HTML code. In fact, this HTML document can also be represented as a tree like this, and this tree we have seen previously also. There is nothing new that I'm speaking here. Now let me show you how you can mark an element and tell that it belongs to a particular class. How can you do that? Very simple. You have to use an attribute called as a class attribute. So I will go inside H1. Now H1 is a heading. So I will make it tell class. Which class does it belong to? It belongs to a class, and I can give any name which I want. I am selecting the name to be heading. Heading. Clear? I'll copy that. Now, similarly, I want all my headings to belong to the same class. So inside H2 also I will tell class is heading. Inside H3 also I will tell class is heading. Inside the other H3 elements I will tell class is heading. Everything. Inside every heading element I will tell that it belongs to a particular class. Any confusion till this point of time? Now the moment I do this, see in my tree, I'm denoting that H1, H2 and these H3s belong to a particular class by showing you a dot and the class name next to it. That is how in the tree representation it works. Any confusion till here? Now, next what you might ask? Next is very simple. All my headings I have classified them. Now I want to classify all my information. See, it's up to me what part of my HTML document I want to classify into which category. That's up to me. But I want here, all my information is in the form of p tags. So I will make all of them as class info by just telling, like I'll leave a space and I will tell class info like this. I will copy that. And the same thing is what I'm going to be pasting inside every p tag. It could be any tag, but I am putting it, since all my information is inside p tag, I'm putting it here. Any confusion till this point of time? So now I have classified all this as info, and in my HTML tree also I've reflected that. So classification has happened. Now what I am going to do is, I am going to style my HTML document by making CSS pick or select an HTML element not based on the element, but based on the class to which an element belongs to. How do you do that? That is where the class selector plays a crucial role. So if I take you to my CSS file, right? Or if I show you my browser output as well as my HTML code at the same time, just watch it all of you. I am not going to use external CSS. I'm going to use internal CSS itself because it will clearly be visible to you. So here after that title, I'll go there and tell style. Inside style, what I'm now going to do is, I will now tell like this that, hey, listen, CSS, the selector that you should be using is a class selector. Now, what is the syntax? Very simple. You have to tell the class name. Assume the class name which I want to select is heading. I will tell heading like this. I'll just tell heading. But you should not simply tell heading. To tell CSS you're selecting based on a class, before the class name, you must put a dot. So see, dot I will put. That is how CSS knows it is a class name. Any confusion till this point? In fact, you can see this color and this class color is one and the same. Any confusion till this point of time? Anyways, now I'll put declaration. Inside that, property value pairs. So I want all my headings to have red background and yellow text, right? So I'm just going to tell background is red, and then color is yellow, and maybe I will make the font family as maybe monospace like this. Any confusion till here? Now, if in case I do this much, all the elements inside my HTML document which belong to a class called as heading will be styled using these property and these values like this. You can see clearly it works. If I increase the size a little bit, you can notice that it has happened. Any confusion till this point of time? Wonderful. Next, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go inside my HTML document and I'll go inside my style, and there I will tell, hey, listen, CSS, select another class by telling dot and the class name, which is the class name's info, like this. And then there I will apply styling. So what I will do is I'll just copy those three property value pairs, paste them again. And what I'm going to do now is I will change background color to something else. and I will change the color to maybe white. Okay. Font family, I will make it as cursive. If I do this, then it will go into the HTML document. It will not select based on the element. It will select based on the class, and all the classes or all the elements which belong to class info will be selected, will be picked. Any confusion till here? And as you can see, all those p tags which belong to class info get styled in that way. Up till this point of time, it is crystal clear to all of you. So very, very powerful, very, very important CSS selector, because you can classify the information in your HTML file, and based on the classification apply styling. Very, very useful. You can group different elements into a certain class and apply styling on them, the way I have done it here. Any confusion till this point of time? Anyways, let's move on and understand the next type of selector, which is called as the ID selector, and let's understand when to use the ID selector. Now it is time for us to understand the next CSS selector, which is called as the ID selector. Now the ID selector is again something which can be used in a variety of different ways, but the primary nature of the ID selector is something I want to explain. So understand it, all of you. If I take you to my browser window and my editor, what you must understand here is this is the same document which we styled previously using the class selector, right? Now I want you to understand something. If I scroll this a little bit on top, out of all these different elements which is there, right? These are all information. See, even the first one, full stack web development, this is a heading. The next P tag, full stack web development, refers to, the development of front. All this basically is the introduction, right? This part, this is the introduction. Now, I want only this introduction to be styled differently. Differently would not be the right word. I would like it to be styled uniquely. And the moment I say unique, it means that the same styling should not be applicable for any other element anywhere. Which means now, if I scroll on top, I want CSS. I want my CSS, scroll it on top. I want my CSS to be able to select this P tag in a unique way. How will I do that is the question. Now, if you want to select something in a unique way, something should be unique about it, which is not repeated in other things. Now, you only think and tell me, what can be unique about an HTML element? Can the element name be unique? Can H1 or P be unique? No, there can be many P tags, there can be many H1 tags, there can be many H2 tags. Element is never unique. All right. Inside the element, content is there. First and foremost, content can never be directly selected using CSS. If you want to select based on content, my dear friend, you must know JavaScript as well, which we will be looking at it later on. But content also can repeat. Of course, I can have another H1 tag with full stack web development. So that also can never be unique. It cannot be guaranteed to be unique. If I come inside the attributes, right, I can have different attributes. Right now, I have an attribute called as class. Tell me, can the class be unique? Class also can never be unique, because see, definitely classes are repeating. So if I want to select an HTML element in a unique way, there should be something unique inside it. And what is the only thing which can be unique about an HTML element and which can be 100% unique is its unique identifier or ID. Yes, my friend, if in case you remember, every tag in HTML can have an ID attribute, and IDs by nature are unique. You must ensure it is unique. That is good coding practice, that is good coding convention. So I want this P tag to be unique, isn't it? Let me give it a unique ID. So I'll go inside P, and there I will just put an ID there. So let the class also be there. Okay, fine, I'll remove the class. Doesn't matter. I'll just remove the class, and this time I'll put ID. And there in ID, I will just call it as intro. I'll call the ID as intro. Now this is unique. Any confusion till this point of time? Now the thing is, I will go inside my CSS now. I'll ask CSS to select this element, not based on the element, not based on the class, definitely not universal selector, but based on its unique ID. And how do you do that? Watch it. I'm going there, and to tell CSS select based on ID, you must start with a hash. I will tell hash. Dot for class, hash for ID. Then tell the name of the ID. Name of the ID is intro. Any confusion till here? There inside that, I'll put the declaration. I'll just copy those same 3 property values and I will just paste it. There I will make the background color as cyan. I will make the color as black. I will make the font family as maybe fantasy like this. Any confusion till here? Now, if in case I go and refresh it, you can notice it changed. So it's selected based on the ID. And the beauty is this styling in my entire document will only be applied to this p tag which has this ID because ID is unique. Any confusion till here? So whenever you want to apply a unique styling to a particular element in your HTML web page, then ID selector is a way to go. Whenever you want to group contents into different categories or classes and apply styling to that entire class, use the class selector. Class selector can be applied to multiple HTML elements, but ID selector can be applied only and only to one unique HTML element, a single HTML element. Any confusion till this point of time? Go crazy experimenting with all of this because naturally by watching me do it, you're never going to become an expert. You need to do it yourself. Practice makes perfect. Thank you so much. Now let us go forward and understand the advanced selectors in CSS. For that, stay tuned.